Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the agriculture debate for the 2023 provincial election. My name is Keisha Rose Topic, and I am the president of the PEI Federation of Agriculture. We are pleased to be your host for tonight's event. I do remember being in this room about 4 years ago, this time of year, and if only we knew what those 4 years were going to hold. We are joined tonight by representatives from the Progressive Conservative Party, Green Party, Liberal Party, and New Democratic Party with us this evening. I want to say thank you all for joining us this evening and demonstrating how important agriculture is to the whole island. Our industry requires true partnership with all levels of government to ensure we can continue providing healthy and affordable food to islanders and around the world. Many of the questions asked of the candidates tonight were submitted by industry members ahead of time, and they cover topics ranging from land use to healthcare. We won't be taking questions from the floor this evening. Our moderator will take things from here. Donald Killorn is the Executive Director of the PEIFA, and he will lead us through this evening's debate. Over to you, Donald.
All right. It's my pleasure to moderate this evening's debate. I want to thank my team who put a lot of work into getting us here tonight. Thank everyone that joined us. I see a lot of familiar faces, a lot of people who are very helpful with our mission at the Federation of Agriculture, including folks up on the dais here. So thank you all for your time. It's our goal to give the parties an opportunity tonight to share their vision for agriculture and how they plan to support our industry. We have had strong engagement from industry stakeholders across Prince Edward Island, and I know that even those that aren't in the room, that Prince Edward Island farmers are very interested and are paying close attention to what will be said this evening. So, tonight's participants: Bevan Baker is the party leader of the Green Party of Prince Edward Island and the candidate in District 17, New Haven Rocky Point. Joe Byrne is the New Democratic Party's candidate for District 12, Charlottetown Victoria Park, and has previously served as the leader of the party. Sharon Cameron is the party leader of the Liberal Party of Prince Edward Island and is the candidate in New Haven Rocky Point. And Dennis King is the party leader of the PEI Progressive Conservative Party and is the party's candidate in District 15, Brackley Hunter River. Thank you again for making time. So the debate format, the debate will begin with an opening statement from each party. Then we'll have questions on 7 topics. Some topics have a few questions. For each question, the candidates will have 90 seconds for a response, and then everyone will have a chance to rebut. For those up here, if you want to take advantage of that opportunity, if you do want to rebut, just give me a signal, and I'm going to call on you in the same order that the questions were answered. So if you were first to answer the question, you'll have the first opportunity to provide a rebuttal. Joanne is our timekeeper down front, so you'll get a yellow card when you have 30 seconds left, and you'll get a pink card when you're out of time. And I will do my best to, if you're almost there, I'll do my best to let you finish. Earlier today in the office, we drew for order. There's some Post-it notes and some Tim Hortons cups involved. It was very official. And in any case, when we're all done, you'll each have a chance to provide a closing statement. So. Any questions? No? I guess that's my job, huh? There are questions. I'm sure. Okay, so we'll get started with the opening statements. The folks are up here in the order that they've been chosen. So this evening, this will sort of be the order with taking turns going first. So we'll begin with Dennis King and the PEI Progressive Conservative Party with the opening statement.
Can you just tap this here? Okay. Well, thank you very much, Donald, and thank you to everyone for being here, and thank you to the Federation of Agriculture for organizing this. The last 4 years have been some of the most trying times in the history of our province, and perhaps no industry has been impacted to the extent that you all have. Our farm families who make up this important industry, which is essential to the fabric of our island. Over the last 4 years, our government has had to lead islanders through unprecedented catastrophe. And in those dark days, we've walked hand in hand together to make our way through it. For this industry, for you, our farm families facing issues, no fault of your own, but impacted in almost every way imaginable, you needed someone to stand with you, to stand there with you, and to be there for you. And whether that was banging on banging on the walls of Parliament in Ottawa, trying to open doors in the halls of Congress in Washington, I walked every step with you through that. For as long as I have had the privilege of being the Premier of Prince Edward Island, the farm families of Prince Edward Island will have a friend in me in that office. The importance of our agriculture sector cannot be overstated. There wouldn't be a community in this entire province that isn't touched in some way by our agriculture sector, not just in the production, but in the benefits that go with that production. The economic output and jobs created by the island farm industry help power our economy, and they power prosperity in our province. Everybody in here should know, and if you don't know, you should quickly learn that when our farm sector succeeds, our province thrives. I look forward to tonight's discussion with my three colleagues on the table, hearing from them and their ideas of what we can talk about to make this industry even better and even more respected in the future. So thank you very much. It's great to be here.
Thank you. Sharon?
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I want to begin by thanking the PEI Federation of Agriculture, Mr. Killorn and his team, and of course my colleagues as well. I noticed they put Peter and I, they put someone between us tonight. Probably good. I'm kidding. I think it's important that I confess that I'm not an expert in agriculture and will not pretend to be one. But I've worked in roles that have allowed me to cross paths with this organization and some of you in this room. As CEO of the Workers' Compensation Board, I worked with the industry as we brought you under our umbrella, and I was impressed with your professionalism and understanding. I can say from what I've seen and heard that agriculture today is not what it looked like for your grandmother and grandfather. It is a business, a family business, built over the generations, now competing for many of you with producers around the world. Things like GPS and auto steer were unheard of. Robotic milkers, climate-controlled barns and warehouses, these are amazing innovations just in the last 25 years. And we know it isn't stopping here. The next generation will see more. Progress, rapid change, moving forward. This industry understands what that means. What I do know and what I know well is that agriculture is our #1 industry in this province, and its successor challenges often show up within the provincial finances. The industry does well, and the province does well. Again, I'm no expert, but I can tell you that I have a team of experts with me, people like Rob Henderson, who served as your minister in the previous Liberal government, candidates Nick Shepherd, Alistair Vino, and Flory Sanderson, who have farmed and understand your complexities. These are the people with me who will be here after the dust settles on next Monday evening that will help steer a sound agricultural policy that works for you. Thank you for this opportunity. I look forward to the questions that lie ahead.
Thank you. Joe?
Thank you, Donald. I would like to begin with a simple land acknowledgement that the land we're on is unceded Mi'kmaq territory. It's a pleasure for me to be here, and Michelle had a previous commitment, made her unable to attend. But I was here 4 years ago with Peter and Dennis at the same table. The importance of this industry just can't be overstated. The challenges that are lying in front of us, all of us, not just farmers and farm families, but if we want this economy to work on PEI, there has to be a clear role for agriculture that allows people to be hopeful, that allows people to generate their hard work and their dedication, but also to ensure a decent quality of life, not just for themselves, but also for their families. That lifestyle, which has developed over hundreds of years, is one that we should be able to rely on. But the challenges are looming bigger and bigger. I don't think there's an industry out there that has to respond to the challenges of international capitalism more than farmers. And the farmers that are here struggling every day, they have to respond to the bottomless pits of money that can come from anywhere in the world, that will manipulate the markets, that will challenge the inputs that are right there. We have to look to the future, how we're also going to adapt to that, because if we don't change how the system is run, we cannot expect that quality of life for farmers and farm families to continue. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Peter?
Thanks, Donnie, and thank you to the Federation for setting up this meeting tonight and inviting us all. Bonsoir, hi. this beautiful province in which we live, and how privileged are we to live here, is facing some very significant challenges. And of course, in the agricultural sector, that's no exception, whether that's challenges brought on by climate change, access to markets, increased input costs, inability to find labor, loss of farmland. There are so many challenges which this sector is facing. Some of them are new challenges. Some of them are very old stories that we've worked our way through before. And I think that for the next 4 years, let's hope they're not as turbulent as the previous 4 years have been, but I think what the agricultural sector needs is a government that understands the challenges, the global challenges facing the sector, that understands that climate change is perhaps the biggest overall challenge, not just to the agricultural sector, but to the future of humanity. And the primary industries here on Prince Edward Island, whether that's farming or fishing or tourism, all depend intimately on a stable climate. And we're losing that. So how are we going to respond to that? How are we as an agricultural province going to maintain this part of our economy, this part of the identity of our province that is so important to us, so that the sector thrives in a very rapidly changing world? And I appreciate the range of questions that we have before us here tonight, because I think they touch on the depth and the breadth of the challenges that we face here as a community, as a province, and particularly the agricultural sector. And I really look forward to answering the questions that are before us tonight. Thanks.
Thank you, Peter. So our first question this evening, and we'll begin with Sharon, and then it'll go left to right. So Joe will be second, and then Peter, and that's how the evening will go. First question is on land use. PEI's Land Matters Advisory Committee published its final report in July 2021, entitled Now is the Time. The report recommended both immediate and interim regulatory changes and long-term planning measures designed to effectively manage land use on Prince Edward Island. Since that time, there has been little action taken and the pace of farmland loss has increased. How will your government act to protect PEI's farmland?
Thank you. This is an issue that we know has been studied many, many times, and yet few solutions under the current government. The island has approximately 590,000 acres of farmland and falling. The average farm size currently sits at 460 acres and rising. On the flip side, and I hear this many times in our district in particular, we have sprawling development. This is further driving up the price of farmland and either putting the price of land out of reach for many operations or forcing farms to mortgage the next generation. A Liberal government will do 4 things. 1, review the Lands Protection Act for loopholes that are being exploited with a mind towards where the money is coming from. 2, as the Federation has argued for some time, we should open the Planning Act and deem agricultural land as resource land. This change would include limitations on how farmland is rezoned, making it more difficult to pull land out of production, while also respecting that some land needs to be utilized for other purposes. 3, ensure all land use planning for agricultural land remain with the province. Downloading this responsibility to municipalities is the wrong call for such an important resource. And lastly, review the land limits every 5 years to ensure the Act recognizes that farms are growing in size and we largely compete on a global scale.
Thank you, Sharon. Joe?
Thanks, Donald. Before I get into some specifics around our policy, I just want to bring us back 4 years. With a commitment that people all across PEI need to be engaged in how we use the land. There was a promise made by one of my colleagues down at the end of the table, said, knowledge is power, transparency is something that all people in Prince Edward Island are not just expecting, but they're demanding from elected officials. He said, I would add my voice to create a searchable corporate registry, and that would be a great start. That way, the proper information gets into the public domain. If we want to make good land use planning decisions. There is a collective wisdom that comes out of the community, that comes out of the experience of working the land, that comes out of the experience of dealing with the challenges of investment in machinery and improvements in technology. And we have to listen to that voice. But we can't listen to that voice if we don't know who the players are at the table. And the only way to start identifying who the players are at the table is to create that searchable public registry that gives everybody access. That's the place to start. But we also need an environmental bill of rights. We have to give people and communities a chance to have decisions about development.
Thank you, Joe. Peter?
I'd first like to start by thanking the work of the Land Matters Advisory Committee. I see Billy Cameron sitting there in the audience, and he, along with a bunch of others, did some tremendous work bringing forward recommendations that echo many of the reports and commissions that we've had for a very long time, going back 50 years. We have had and the most recent ones would be the Thompson Commission and the Carver Report, all telling us the same thing, that we need to have a land use plan from tip to tip. And I haven't heard from either of the people who've responded to this question thus far that a land use plan is central to preserving farmland, but it absolutely is. And I can tell you that the two parties that have governed here on Prince Edward Island since we had responsible government, none of them has ever implemented a land use plan. And without that land use plan, it is almost impossible for us to control development. And when you can't control development, you end up with a situation where farmland, and we're losing 39 acres of farmland every day here on Prince Edward Island. That's 14,000 acres of farmland gone forever. And the absolute central thing we have to do is to develop a land use plan from tip to tip. For 50 years, we have had recommendations to do that. We have had successive Liberal and Conservative governments who say they care about the farming industry, but have not done the most basic thing to protect our most basic resource, which is our precious land base. And you need a government that recognizes why we need a land use plan.
Thank you, Peter. Dennis?
Yeah, I think this is probably one of the most challenging issues any government faces. I mean, the reality is we're an agricultural province, but we're also a growing province and an island province, and that growth has to be managed within a very delicate system of balance. You know, the Land Matters Report, which my colleague Boyce Thompson is here, he initiated and did some great work on with so many of you. I put forward 13 recommendations. Of those recommendations, we have 10 in or in part thereof being worked on. We have committed to establishing a land use plan, developing one that can guide us for the next 30 or 40 years or beyond. As well, we, for the first time since it was implemented by J. Angus MacLean, we modernized the Land Protection Act. We overhauled the Business Corporation Act to close some of those land loopholes that are in place. I think it's just something we need to continue to work upon. But I think it's also, we have to be very careful in how we do this, how we develop and where we develop. One of the biggest things you do in government at the cabinet table every Tuesday morning has to do with land issues. And the recommendations that come from IRAC, we always try to make sure that farmland remains in farm production unless there's a significant reason why it shouldn't. But we also need to make allowance for families like you who want their kids to build homes close to the farm, etc. So there's a delicate balance that we need to find, and we've made some very, very positive strides over the last 4 years, and I'd like to build upon that for the next 4.
Thank you. Sharon, you'd like to rebut? 30 seconds.
Yes, thank you. And as I talk to Mr. Bevan Baker about all the time, it's time for us to look forward. I can't answer to what happened in the past, but here's what I do want to tell you. One of the other things that the Liberal government wants to do is mandate a commission to undertake ongoing assessments. So we would have a land use commission that would also include people who haven't been involved perhaps in the conversation before. We would have representation from the First Nations community, and that would be an ongoing commission that would answer to the legislature, so it would have some power and authority. So
thank you, Sharon.
Yeah.
Joe, would you like to go again?
Yeah, just
give me a heads up if you'd like to rebut.
Yeah.
Be able to come.
Okay. It's just a general commentary. 4 years ago, everybody at the table, we agreed that the creation of a land bank would be the way to go. And I understand all the challenges that government has faced, but this is not a new idea. It's an idea that should have been developed. If we want a good land use policy, we actually have to make it possible for people to be able to farm the land. And a land bank is not such a complicated idea that we can't get it done.
Thank you, Joe. Peter?
So we've heard from all four parties now, and only one of us has suggested that the land use plan is absolutely central and critical to this issue. So I think you need to take that home with you. The other thing that I'd like to say is that we need to make the processes to determine land ownership, when land is transferred, when land is purchased, and who actually owns the land, far more transparent. And I know Dennis just said that they have made strides in that, but you know what, they've made little tiny steps, and we need to make big leaps in that regard. It's very, very difficult in this province to understand who owns land, and especially when it is transferred, and we need to fix that.
Thank you, Peter.
I would just reiterate again, we have committed and have initiated the process for a land use plan to be developed as one of the recommendations from the Land Matters Act report, and I look forward to making sure that is a good document that can guide us through the future. And I also, you have to be mindful in this industry that when people make the comments that they make here, there's a whole lot of farmers perhaps in here that feel like they're being treated like criminals or something for owning land. So it's a very fine line that we have to be careful of in here, in trying to pass judgment on every farmer that you want to know every bit of their business. These are corporations that are private and they deserve to be respected too.
Thank you, Dennis. Interesting. I've always had interesting conversations with the Federation of Municipalities on this one as well. And our rural communities are important, and we'll have questions about them later on. The next topic is industry growth. On Prince Edward Island, a significant limitation to industry growth is access to markets in agriculture. Shipping our products off island is an expense that our competitors don't have to bear. And for the last almost year and a half, there are those products that we can't ship off island at all. The industry requires a strategy for growth that responds to these challenges. How will your government develop opportunities for island farmers and ensure our products remain competitive in global markets? And we'll get started with you, Joe.
Thanks, Donald. Well, first off is to begin on the transport side, recognizing that the climate crisis that we're living through is going to continue to drive prices up. We can move, and we should move, on reducing tolls on the Confederation Bridge and on the Northumberland ferries, because that's the low-hanging fruit. Long term, the further we want to transport produce or food across this continent, the more it's going to become expensive. So we have to put the effort into developing our local markets. We have three specific targets on this. One is called Grow PEI, where we help young farmers access land, support farmers and processors to expand local food production. And talking to somebody that raises hogs and pigs for slaughter, and he was telling me about the challenges on the processing side. The next one is Feed PEI, that we can use the products that we have here to develop our own markets so we consume on our own. And the next is Buy PEI, so that we have a very strong, recognizable brand that when it's out there on the stores, people are able to make a choice about buying locally. We need to do those things: Grow PEI, Buy PEI, and Feed PEI.
Thank you, Joe. Peter?
I'll start by reiterating what Joe started with, which is we need to look at the immediate transportation costs to get stuff off this island. That's the ferry and that's the bridge. And I think you'll probably hear all four parties tonight talking about entering into negotiations with the federal government and Straight Crossing International to make sure that we do everything we can to make that barrier, that unnecessary economic barrier, reduce the cost of that. And there are various ways of doing that, and we're not going to go into that now, but that's a fundamental part of reducing the competitive disadvantage that we have here. I think we need to diversify the crops that we have. I know that mustard seed was being shipped off the island here, $1,200, $1,300 a ton a little while ago, almost unheard of profit margins for new crops. But you have to find the market for that. And you need a government that is willing to bear some of the some of the risk involved in entering into new crops to find new markets. So there are things that we can do. We need to diversify our crops. And we would also help to promote a shift towards best management practices, because the market out there for sustainably grown crops, whether that's cereals or whether it is meat products, is burgeoning. And I think that where we cannot, just physically cannot meet the competitive disadvantage that we have in being a small province in a remote place, we absolutely can beat them on quality, and that's where we need to look.
Thank you, Peter. Dennis?
Any strategy starts with you. You are the experts, whether you're in the potato industry, whether you're in the dairy industry, beef, hogs, whatever you're in, you are the experts, and government should be there to try to help you build and maintain and sustain some of those markets. We do an amazing job as a province in Prince Edward Island. I mean, we talked a lot about potatoes for the last year, and rightly so, but 30% of the potatoes consumed in Puerto Rico come from Prince Edward Island and have for decades. So we're all around the world with our products. You know the world that you work in. What government needs to do is to help that to be a little bit more affordable for you. The cost of the bridge is a big thing, but also there's some other incidental costs that we can work on. One of the simple things that we tried to do early in our mandate was to get rid of the tax on marked gas that you were using for farm trucks going. Used to be able to only use it, take from field back to the farm, but now we've made that easier for you. So you need to continue to do things to make it a little bit more affordable for you. But any government should take their leadership from you. You're the experts, your industry organizations are the experts, and you are the ones who have been selling product around the world, top quality, the best products around the world for decades, and I'd just like to continue to help you to do that and grow it if we can.
Thank you, Sharon.
Thank you. So we know that federal governments over the last decade have signed various large trade agreements with countries around the world. This is good news, but personally there isn't exactly a growth strategy, and planning is something we're really promoting these days, with many of those to ensure Canadians are able to access markets in ways that may have been envisioned. A Liberal government would work with the industry and our federal counterparts at Export Development Canada, Global Affairs and International Trade to really ensure opportunities are there for island products to find their way into new markets, further ensuring profitability for farms across PEI. We also look at Confederation Bridge and the expense you all pay for product leaving the province not seen with your regional competitors. Liberal Senator Percy Down has talked about erasing the toll and has had that conversation in Ottawa. It's also important to be mindful of our supply managed sectors in the province and ensure that any strategy around trade does not further erode foreign market access we gave up recently with the United States, for example. Any strategy needs to be led in partnership with the industry. We want to facilitate, but having the Federation out front on this will be very, very important. Thank you.
Opportunity to rebut. Joe?
Thanks, Donald. Just in the overall context, what it is astounding, and you are the people that have to live with this the most. Why is it that certain small sectors of our population or economy can make so much money selling food and farmers can't? That's the ridiculous situation that we're in. And this is not just about finding the economies of scale that allow us to get our markets to product. This is about an industry that's structured to focus money and power in the hands of fewer and fewer people. We've got to change that.
Peter?
Thanks, Tony. As I've said a couple of times, I think already tonight, that we will never compete on quantity, but we can absolutely compete on quality and high quality products. And I think we need to promote value-added processing here on Prince Edward Island. We already have some fantastic infrastructure here, which is allowing us to develop products beyond just taking them off the field. And in addition to our international exports, which of course will always be an important part of farming here on Prince Edward Island, I think we need to focus much more on our regional marketplace, partly because of transportation costs.
Thank you, Peter. Dennis?
I think, yeah, one of the other things that any government could and should do to make you remain competitive in the global market is to make sure your products can get to market. When we went through what we did with the potato situation, it was unfair, it was wrong, and it needed to be called out, and we did call that out. But let's not forget, we're still locked out on seed, the backbone of our industry, which is being held up at the border in PEI for no reason. This is product that people want all over Canada, all over North America and beyond. And we need to get that rolling. You need to stand up and fight for that industry. I fought with you, and I'll continue to fight with you to right that horrible wrong.
Thank you, Dennis. Sharon? You again? Thank you. Okay. It is awful that we can't ship seed potatoes. If we can't ship seed potatoes from Prince Edward Island, something is seriously wrong with our relationship with Ottawa. On to a question on livestock. Since 2000, the size of PEI's livestock herd has decreased by half. With production costs higher than ever before, there is significant risk in raising livestock. However, prices are strong. We have Atlantic beef products, good processing capacity on Prince Edward Island, and the availability of manure can be a key asset in decreasing emissions from agriculture and addressing climate change. How will your government work with all stakeholders to increase the size of the livestock herd in Prince Edward Island? And we'll start with you, Peter.
So I first want to give a shout out to Russ Mallard and the ABP and the work that they have done to become profitable. 10 years ago that looked like a processing facility that was going to be very hard to make it work, and now they're doing fantastic work in a very competitive market, so good for them. I think there again is potential on Prince Edward Island here to access that growing market for quality products. We have PEI certified beef, we have Blue Dot Reserve, we have the Green Tag Angus program, which has just started. All of these things are high-end products. And I've seen them in the stores. I've seen pictures. Dave Francis posted some pictures of his product in Toronto. These are products that people want, and they're willing to pay for them. So I really think that the way that the beef industry here is going to survive and thrive into the future is to focus on that marketplace. People want sustainably produced, ethically produced meat. And here on Prince Edward Island, we don't have massive herds. We don't have factory farms. Every farm is a family farm. And I think the competitive market advantage we have in promoting that, and we've made a great start here with Canada's Food Island. I think if we continue to do that, that's where the future of the beef industry here, where we can actually rebuild it with government supports. I understand that there are risks involved in getting back and in increasing our herd size. But I think the markets are there if we focus in the right places and if you have a government to support you in order to move you there.
Thank you, Peter. Dennis?
Yeah, I think increasing the size of the herd is directly tied to making sure you can make a little bit of money as you do it. I mean, business will always find its level, and one of the things that I'm very happy with how the success at the beef plant has really transpired and it's become profitable, but one part that I've always had a challenge with in that area is that they haven't shared that with their number one shareholder, which is the cattle producers in PEI. And there's still a premium price being paid to Quebec and other farmers to ship product in here that our local farmers aren't getting. And I think until we can take that money and make sure it's distributed fairly across PEI and people get paid adequately for their product here, and they can invest in where they need to invest it to increase the herd and increase the quality of the herd, that's a really big sticking point for me and for us. So that's where I think we can help. We have some of the resources here. We're doing well. The product that we're making at the beef plant is high-end. People want it, and we're paying a lot for it in the stores. We just need to make sure some of that gets into the wallets of the people who can produce it here, and more of it should be produced here because it's high-end quality stuff.
Thank you, Dennis. Sharon?
Thank you. So I would echo a lot of those things. When the previous Liberal government came into power in 2007, we made some significant investments in the Atlantic beef plant that we see today as a success story, and it's kept livestock industry that we have today viable. And Atlantic beef needs about 700 to 800 cattle a week to meet, but are getting about 50% of that. A Liberal government recognizes that PEI livestock strategy is currently lacking. This strategy was actually introduced by my colleague Rob Henderson and finished by the current government. The problem is this government failed to provide the proper funding that it needs, one of the central pieces including providing price reassurances. The price is good today, but we know the cycle, and we know what goes up eventually goes down. Buyers are hesitant. Price assurance takes a certain level of risk out of the equation. We see it in other provinces, however. A Liberal government would also invest in low-interest government financing and grants to help producers expand existing herds, expand and improve community pastures, and support new entrants. Without a strong livestock strategy that has a central focus on growing our herd, we are at risk of losing an industry that we should all be proud of. We have a world-class product in this province, and we need a strategy that capitalizes on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. Joe?
There is no question on the quality of food production on this island. None. The people that have been growing and raising the vegetables, raising the beef for the hogs, do a phenomenal job. This is not an issue that of course we have to pay attention to try and find ways to make it sustainable over the long term. The issue is that the prices are set outside of this province, and the prices aren't related to the cost of production. And we've seen in the last couple of weeks where Galen Weston, a billionaire, can go to a parliamentary committee and say, we don't make any money. And then just recently we have Walmart saying, well, we don't make any money. Somebody's making money on this, and it's not farmers. And if we don't put that ability for a few people to make lots of money into discussion on the table, it won't matter what we do, because we're still leaving control of the industry and the people that get to set prices based on what they want to pay, not based on the hard work and the difficult times and the economic challenges that comes with producing that food. That has to be part of the discussion if we want to find a solution.
Thank you, Joe. Peter, you'd like to rebut?
Yeah. Yes, I'd love to. Sharon mentioned earlier she didn't want to look back, and then in that response she talked about the investments the Liberal Party made in 2007. Great investments, don't get me wrong, into the ABP. But let's be clear, you cannot go back and just pick the good things in your record. You have to be responsible and you have to own it all. So, the soil health here on the island has been decreasing for a very long time. We have a longitudinal study that goes back 20 years, and we know that the soil organic matter is decreasing. Having larger herd sizes here and natural manure being put back in the soil is one of the ways that we can bring back that soil organic matter. That's one of the ways that it's really important to keep our herds.
Thank you. Dennis?
Yeah, I think that, the other side of the equation here is there's two sides to the ledger. There's what you make at the end, but there's also what you input to make that. And I think government can be a little bit more helpful, and perhaps should be more helpful on that side of the ledger to make it a little bit more easier for you, a little bit more affordable for you, and help you with some of the inputs along the way so it can lead to more profitability. But I think having more cattle here it's good for the soil, it's good for everybody, but you have to be able to make some money to do it, and that's a big thing. And if government can help there, I'd be happy to try and continue on the plan.
Thank you. Good. One of my favorite beef farms, Kingston View Farms, they have a logo that says beef, soil, and carbon. That's what it says underneath the logo. I think that's a real forward-thinking approach, and I hope they can get paid for all three before too long. Next topic is workforce and skills. This is an issue that touches every single farm on Prince Edward Island. Approximately 40% of the agricultural workforce in Prince Edward Island is foreign labor. The recruitment of this workforce is costly to island producers, and the lack of available labor poses a significant threat to the industry's sustainability. What actions will your government take to alleviate the significant labor shortage in island agriculture? And we'll start with you, Dennis.
Well, this is a subject that keeps the Premier busy every day in every sector across PEI, whether it's healthcare or whether it's in our hospitality industry. We have the unique position of, on one hand, having the highest number of participation in jobs in our history with the lowest unemployment rate, but at the same time it seems every sector is looking for workers, and it's quite a predicament that we find ourselves in. We've been trying to determine how we're at that point, but we're also trying to work with industries such as yours to see what we can do to make it a little bit easier, whether it's through bringing in new Canadians to work here and to work and raise a family here and to live here, or whether it's trying to help you mechanize and automate. I was talking to Chad before here from ADL, and ADL has an opportunity to automate a little bit more, which can help alleviate some of their challenges, but they're probably going to need some significant investment from the provincial government, from the federal government, and others. And I think that's some of the creative ways we have to look at this issue. But you know, labor challenges is something that across the board that every government across Canada has been struggling with, and ours as well. And it's impacted every industry, and everyone seems to be doing just a little bit more with just a few less people. And it's at some point it's going to break, and we have to find a way to work through that.
Thank you, Dennis. Sharon?
You know, it's not like this is a new issue, so I will take some responsibility, but I'm going to say the Green Party and the current government, we did have a population strategy, and I haven't heard much of a strategy in the last 4 years. But we do know that the population growth, and it was growth, did double over the last 4 years, and there's no plan to kind of alleviate or deal with that. And labor force is access to good labor is something we do have, we hear in every industry. A couple of things that we would do is expand high school programs and pathways into industries through additional funding to agriculture and classroom initiatives and farm and food care PEI in order to expose students and aspects to public range of career opportunities. So we need more opportunities in high school to expose our high school kids. Expanding immigration recruitment for workers to support labor market needs. I think the third thing, though, is that what we want to do is further develop a seasonal worker benefits program. So PEI Farm Team was a Liberal initiative, and to allow producers to attract young workers by offering publicly funded benefits. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. Joe?
Well, I'd like to start just by talking about temporary foreign workers. And I'd like to acknowledge Ryan McRae with the Cooper Institute, who's done a phenomenal amount of work over the last few years working directly with temporary foreign workers. There's one principle that should be at stake here. And why do we bring foreign workers in? They work for 6 months or 9 months, and then they're forced to leave. If you're good enough to work in this province, you should be good enough to live in this province and have a clear pathway to permanent residence upon your arrival. That's one thing. You shouldn't have to put at risk your permanent residency or your family's well-being in your country of origin so you can come here and help us out in our industry. But the second is it has to be wages. So we're supporting a guaranteed basic income because every worker in this province, every single one, should be able to live a dignified life in a quality, affordable residence with enough income to support themselves and their family. These are not complicated ideas. We've seen the ability of this economy to provide that. Let people that are going to work here live here permanently. Let them bring their families. It's the best population strategy for rural PEI, by the way, and they need our support. And the next thing is let's make sure that every worker in this industry and in other industries has enough to live a dignified quality of life.
Thank you, Joe. Peter?
So we're going to have to continue to bring workers into our province to meet the gaps, and TFWs have been the favoured way of doing that. We typically have about 1,000 TFWs here during the growing season, not all in the agricultural sector. But I think the other programs that we have, the Atlantic Immigration Program and the Skilled Workers Program, and let's be clear that much of the work on farms is skilled work. It's very highly skilled work. And if we are to maintain the production of our agricultural sector here, we're going to have to continue to bring in workers to do it. I appreciate Joe's point about wages. And of course, any increase in wage creates an immediate burden for employers. And one way that government can help to shoulder that burden is to offer tax relief for those individuals. And the Green Party platform, we are very much in favour of increasing wages because there are too many people on Prince Edward Island currently, whether you're in agriculture or any other sector, who are working full-time in jobs and living below the poverty line. And one way the government can help is to offer tax relief to those people so they have more money in their pockets. And that shoulders the burden of these increased costs with the employers. And we would do that through a refundable tax credit, and we would also increase the low income tax threshold. It's a much fairer way of making sure that workers here in this province have a living wage, whilst also recognizing that the struggles of small businesses are real, and farms, of course, are small businesses.
Thank you, Peter. Dennis, would you like to rebut?
Yeah, I just, we're living in a time period of tremendous change in many, many different areas. I mean, our farm families aren't big like they used to be. There's 8 in my family. You know, I now have 3. Like, the times are changing. If you look in western Prince Edward Island, where the lobster industry has been really strong, they used to have 2 helpers on the boat, now they have 3. That's taking another 1,000 people out of the labor force. These are the challenges and realities that we're dealing with. I don't think it's entirely wages. I think most of you out there will pay what you can if you can find the people to do the work. Government can certainly help with incentives and everything, but we need some more creativity here and to take our leadership from you to deal with these challenges. Thanks, Tom.
Joe?
Just as a response to Dennis on the question of wages, there's, and to Peter as well, the idea of guaranteed basic income is not meant to put the primary burden of a living wage on a farm producer, a farmer. That's not it. The idea of a guaranteed basic income is recognizing that all of us in our community benefit when every one of us has a decent living wage.
Thank you, John. Peter?
2 things. I'd love to see the temporary foreign worker program be used as a pathway towards citizenship here. Many of you will no doubt have worked with temporary foreign workers. Wonderful people who come here are contributing enormously to our communities, and I think more than perhaps some of the other streams that have brought new islanders here are more inclined to stay here in our province after they get here. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, for people particularly in rural areas, we need to make sure that their basic services are met, that they can find affordable housing, that there is healthcare available for them. I know there's a question later on dealing with this, but it's a fundamental part of making sure we have employment in rural areas.
Thank you, Peter. Okay. Our farms are going to become high-tech. You know, the opportunities on our farms for high-skilled labor is only growing every day, so it'll be exciting to see how it evolves in the next 4 years. The next question is on water. In 2022, after 20 years, the moratorium on high-capacity wells was lifted on Prince Edward Island. To ensure sustainable water quality, water quantity, and to allow for growth in our agricultural production, PEI needs clear policies and regulations governing water. What would your government do to ensure we manage our province's water resources effectively? Begin with you, Sharon.
Thank you. I recognize that this is an emotionally charged issue for many islanders and something to be taken very seriously. Water is essential to life, and we need to protect the resource. I am proud as a Liberal to see that the PEI Water Act was introduced by the previous Liberal government and sets forth clear visions for how to manage our water resource here in the province. I will say that I support the lifting of the moratorium in principle, as the science has been quite clear. The Federation, in partnership with other agricultural stakeholders, argued the scientific case well and utilized water experts to demonstrate that a responsible water management plan justified the action the current government rightfully took. I think the focus now needs to move to water and land management. The alternate land use service exists to help take sensitive land out of production. I want to double the funding in this program. We need to further examine buffer zones in areas that are prone to runoff, and we need further investment in things like berms and terraces. Investing in water infrastructure in clusters where potato production is prevalent in our platform is something that needs to be examined. The Water Act works. Let's trust the science.
Thank you, Sharon. Joe?
Thank you. The experience that we've had to date on the use of water, some people are saying that the science is clear, but I've heard it in communities who are saying all of a sudden my well had to go down another 40 feet or 150 feet in one case up in northern PEI. That's not an accident. When we draw too much water out of those aquifers, there is definitely going to be there has to be some effect on it. What we've done, though, with this industrial model of agriculture is that we've forced farmers into one model of production, which is higher technology, more inputs, more capital intensive, and by extension, more water. This has to be a much broader public discussion. But if we don't continue a moratorium, we can expect to see other parts of the province affected. And this also includes the expansion of cities. We want to increase the population. They're going to live somewhere. They're going to use water. And where is that water going to come from? Do we want to continue to build high-density wells so we can expand our urban areas that's going to affect agriculture? This has to be part of a much broader discussion, but we have to start with at least a moratorium on more high-capacity wells.
Thank you. Peter?
I'd like to start off by giving credit where credit is due, and that is that the development of the Water Act by the previous Liberal government was a template for how we should do public consultation. It was thorough, it was successful, people felt engaged, people felt that their voices were heard. And the question is, how would your government ensure that we manage our province's water resources effectively? So in the development of the regulations around this, I think that is exactly the same thing that we have to do. The stakeholders have called for an arm's length, independent authority, a water authority, in order to manage that. And I think that's exactly what we have to do. We have not heard yet from government exactly what that would look like. But I think it needs to be something which is led by experts, not politicians. And I think, again, that the template that the Water Act gave us for that inclusive, community-minded development of this water authority, whatever that looks like, is going to be absolutely critical. We have one aquifer here, but we have multiple watersheds, and I think that the needs and the peculiarities of each watershed are different. And I think that's why we need data from all watersheds to make sure that what we are doing in one, perhaps we can put a high capacity well somewhere without any concerns whatsoever. But perhaps others which are already tapped out, we cannot do that. So we need specific data for each watershed. For me, that's absolutely critical, and that's something that we've brought up repeatedly in the House. But I think if we do this well and thoughtfully, and we use the science, and we use evidence-based, we will find a way to absolutely preserve the water and allow all of the industries on Prince Edward Island to thrive.
Thank you, Peter. Dennis?
Well, I mean, no government wanted to touch this before I got here, and but we took it on because that's what governments do. When you're given positions of leadership and there's difficult decisions, you take it on. There was a group of 18 farmers, I think, from the middle part of the province who came into my office on a Friday afternoon when the drought was as high as it's probably been, and they had their permits shut off. They couldn't water their crops. And when they were driving by North River Road, they came by the school and Simmons Playground, and every water flasher was going, watering the grass in Charlottetown. So you imagine how offensive that would have been to these farmers who were dealing with mental health issues and losing money every day and fear of losing their farms. So I said something has to be done. We're going to do it. We're going to follow research and we're going to follow science. And we're going to put in place plans to allow farmers to use the water, which we need to grow our crops, which drives the economy of this province. And that's what we've done. And it's nobody in here wants the Wild West when it comes to this. We don't want to drain anybody's water. We're going to follow if you go on the water website in Prince Edward Island right now, you can see in real time our levels of water, and it's all throughout PEI where we have to be careful of the watersheds, but that's what a good plan does. And we also will reward farmers for making their soil healthier, because healthy soil needs less water, it holds water longer, and so we'll use science and research and data, and we'll treat you like the farmers that you are and not treat you like you're some kind of bandits.
Thank you, Dennis. Peter? Judge?
Sure, for a rebuttal?
30 seconds.
Yeah, I mean, you all know out there what the capital costs incurred when you put in an irrigation system in your farm. It's a significant expense, and given the marketplace conditions at the moment and the uncertainty of the future, I'm not sure how many farmers are going to be rushing out to do this. I've spoken to many who are happy that there is the opportunity to do it, but also understand that this is perhaps not something that makes economic sense just now. So I appreciate Dennis bringing up soil health, because best management practices to increase soil organic matter and to introduce low-till or no-till farming are ways that we can maintain the soil health and reduce the need for irrigation, and of course bring in new crops as well.
Thank you. Dennis, 30 seconds.
I would just say that I would support Peter's initial comments that we should follow the experts, and to me, you're the expert. You know what you need to grow the crop. You know you don't need too much water, you need just the perfect amount, and you need it at certain times when the crop is going there. So I put my faith in you, I put my faith in the research and the science and the information and the good policies that we'll build around it to make sure our province is strong, not just for farmers, but for everybody, and we protect these wonderful resources. But we need water to grow our crops.
Thank you, Dennis. Okay, moving on to energy. The province's effort to reach net zero by 2040 depends on the continued electrification of our province's transportation and buildings, as well as a 25% reduction in emissions from agriculture. That's what's been requested of us by the provincial government. But the production of renewable energy on farm is limited by both access to three-phase power and the 100 kilowatt cap on renewable energy capacity. Does your party have a plan to ensure the continued electrification of the economy, and what role will agriculture play in that plan? Start with you, Joe.
Well, I think the first step is, if we're going to engage agriculture, then it's not something that I want to sit down and this is what I want you to do. The first thing that we would do is listen. How do you see this working? What kind of investments are you looking at? And how do we make sure that if you are producing excess electricity, that you can actually get it back into the grid? And that means actually starting to put some controls on Maritime Electric, so that if you're going to be able to produce power, that you actually have a reasonable way to sell the surplus power back into the grid. But get the ideas from the people that have to live with it. That's it. The next objective is that we would look at energy retrofitting 3% of buildings every year. Like, this is has to be ongoing investment and an ongoing evaluation and assessment. That we have to be a lot more efficient at how we're using the electricity, and then we have to support innovation in generation and storage. These are these technological developments that are going to be coming up, and we just heard the discussion on the federal budget this afternoon. Like, investing in those green jobs is going to have to happen, and it's going to require investments from the province, but also partnering up with the feds. That this is the alternative, not just for the province, but for the country.
Thank you. Peter?
Oh, the answer is that yes, of course, we do have a plan, because it's critical. An electrification of everything is what everybody needs to be doing now, but of course that electricity has to be clean electricity. We're not any further ahead if the electricity we use is coming from coal-fired power stations. So absolutely we need to produce clean electricity here, and I think there's an enormous opportunity for the agricultural community to be a contributor to that, and for that to be a revenue stream for you. Our caucus has pressed repeatedly in the legislature to lift the 100 kilowatt limit which is currently in place. We had a private member's bill to do exactly that, and it was voted down. So there are things that we have to do. We are going to have to work with Maritime Electric in terms of three-phase power, which was one of the parts of this question. Absolutely, we need to get three-phase power everywhere it is required on Prince Edward Island, and that is going to mean working with Maritime Electric. Indeed, we can increase the capacity beyond 100. And if we were to do that, if we were to use the barns that are out there, the fields to hold solar panels, there are opportunities for farmers to augment your income. And again, there are already good programs in place, and that's another thing I will give this government credit for. But we can do better, and lifting that cap is going to be absolutely fundamental to allow farmers to gain income from photovoltaics, which is a fantastic way to go forward for everybody.
Thank you, Peter. Dennis?
Yeah, I visited about 5 farms in District 15 during this election, and every one of them had told me the same thing, that they would really love to make some investments in solar, but the cost of bringing three-phase power, a certain amount of distance they have to bring it, just doesn't make it really viable for them. So I think this is an area where government really has to do what we did in the past when it was electric power in the 30s and 40s and 50s, and whether it was asphalt in other communities. The government needs to make an investment in the backbone of this. So I've always viewed farmers in this province as you're the first environmentalist. You're the ones who care most about this. You're the ones who live off the land, and you protect the resource along the way. And I want to work with, and I think I've demonstrated over the last 4 years that I want to work with anyone who wants to work to make PEI better, to make your lives a little bit more affordable. So I'm certainly committed to doing that. Also, our investments that we're making in clean tech with our clean tech park in Georgetown, I think those are the jobs of the future, but the opportunity to work with Holland College and with UPEI and with industry associations and with individual farmers to work on individual solutions for PEI will be what sets that apart in this province, and I'm really excited for those opportunities. I think some of the smartest people in the world are on farms here in PEI, and I'm really excited to what we can achieve together in the future.
Thank you, Dennis. Sharon?
Thank you. I think we've talked a lot about Fiona in some of our other debates and in some of our other opportunities. But I think that created another opportunity for us to look at our relationship with Maritime Electric and our dependency of power on other provinces. We know that three-phase power has been a long-standing ask and something that makes sense. It's more efficient use of power and quite correctly helps with renewable energy. And it's wrong now to expect producers to bear the full cost of running this power to their operations. Government has a role to play with the utility provider and to provide assistance needed to share in the cost of getting power to operations across the province. And it won't happen overnight. We know that it takes time, and we have some things we have to explore and review. And we've talked about solar power. Agriculture holds a great deal of potential when it comes to renewable power generation, and we think about the barns and some of the solar power potential we have that we could expand on. And we know that farmers are taking advantage of this, and there are rebates in place today, but this needs to be increased. Agriculture has a great deal of potential when it comes to this area, and I firmly believe that we need to talk with industry and discuss how best to put in place a program that works for you. It would be a win-win for everyone if done correctly. Thank you.
Peter?
I will. Thank you, Donnie. I think underlying all this, we have to study the possibility of making Maritime Electric a public utility. A lot of the challenges that we have faced, whether that is following Fiona, or just the arbitrary, I would put them, limits that Maritime Electric seems to have in place and changes at will, are making it difficult for us to develop the sort of energy substructure that we would need in our province to become truly energy independent. It would not be cheap. The figures I've heard are about $500 million to buy the distribution structure that Maritime Electric has, but amortized over time. That's absolutely something that a provincial government could do. Obviously, there would be many talks involved in that, and I'm not suggesting it would be easy, but I think we have to put that on the table. Because if we want true energy independence and to be able to carve the path that we prefer for our province, we have to look at that.
Thank you, Peter. Joe?
Yeah. Thank you, Peter. It will be no surprise to anybody in this room who's listened to New Democrat in the last few decades. Our objective is to make public Maritime Electric. That's the objective. We cannot continue to provide Fortis shareholders with the profit margins when the benefits of electricity production and distribution are realized right here. That money should stay here.
Thank you, Joe. Anything else? Moving on. Okay, related but different. Next topic is climate change. Question on, geez, what is this question on?
Climate change. Climate change. Number six. Bonnie.
That's funny, I wrote the thing. One of them's on adaptation, one of them's on mitigation. I think this one's,
I have a copy here.
This one's about mitigation, I'm almost positive. This is about ecosystem services, it's about all sorts of things. This is about things that are happening on PEI farms today. Farmers, lots in the room, are adopting climate-friendly practices to sequester greenhouse gases, restore ecosystems, and protect biodiversity. These actions are necessary to reduce emissions and ensure the province reaches its net zero goal by 2040, as well as provide a number of ecosystem services and other services to and benefits to our society. How will your government incentivize farmers to provide these environmental benefits? We'll start with you, Peter.
Thanks, Donnie. I always appreciate your depth of knowledge on these issues, Donnie, and you threw in ecosystem services there as if that's something everybody knows about, so I appreciate that. All of our primary industries here are dependent on a stable climate, none more so than the agricultural sector. And one of the things that I think we need to do, the ALICE program and the Agricultural Stewardship program have not seen increases in their funding for a very long time, the ALICE program since its inception. And we all know how the economics of agriculture and the cost of land has increased since then. So our platform has a 50% increase in each of those programs. The Agricultural Stewardship program, of course, deals with soil conservation, soil health, integrated pest management, appropriate use of pesticides, all of those things. And I think an increase in funding for those programs, and they are always oversubscribed, is going to allow more farmers to do what they want to do, which is to have sustainable practices in place on their farms. I think the development of carbon credits is so important. I introduced a motion in the legislature last year to make Prince Edward Island the first net zero agricultural province, to pay farmers to sequester carbon. And this is another untapped potential revenue source for farmers in this province. And you need a government that will work in partnership to do that. You're already doing so many good things to sequester carbon, and you need to be paid to do that, because as well as not releasing more carbon into the atmosphere, we have to capture it, and you should be paid for doing that.
Thank you. Dennis?
Yeah, we have introduced the PEI Agriculture Climate Solution as a pilot program, and that's designed to encourage and provide assistance to the agriculture industry to help you implement best practices around the mitigation of greenhouse gases and to capture carbon, to assure carbon is stored in the soil. Actually, for the first time, we've actually negotiated a 25% increase in our federal funding to the Sustainable Canadian Agriculture Partnership, which will allow us to increase funding for programs like ALICE, for example. So that will be funding tree planting and berms and so many other initiatives. I mean, we talked a little bit tonight here about soil health initiatives. That's another something that we can continue to work together on. Our platform also talks about supporting green farming initiatives, including solar, which we've just talked about. With three-phase power, getting some of those things that we need to do to help you help yourselves and to help our province in the same breath. But the diversification of crops, exploring niche crops, all of those things that you do every day, as I say, as the first environmentalist, I want to continue to work with you to provide funding and assistance and whatever other resources we can to make a really significant difference in this area.
Thank you, Dennis. Sharon?
Thank you. It is exciting to hear about all of the new innovations that have happened already. And as we talk about PEI, we want to also remember that we aren't a smokestack province, so we should be proud of that as a starting point. Anyway, but farmers are farming in a more sustainable way than ever before. And so we should all be proud of those innovations that we've all talked around the table here already this evening. But there's always more to be done. We've mentioned the ALICE program. It's a great program that incentivizes farmers to take certain land out of production, helps them invest, management practices that keep soil where it belongs and drives water away from runoff. This program, as the industry has correctly pointed out, is grossly underfunded given its importance. Liberal government would double the funding in this program as one way to immediately provide further incentives for the industry. And I think we'd also, we have some other wonderful opportunities here around the School of Sustainable Design Engineering. So we have great partners here that we can also continue to explore new initiatives with. Thank you.
Thank you. Joe?
I think the place to start is to understand that farm families have led so much innovation in this province, period. We need to continue to support that which is already natural. So increasing soil health, soil fiber is just going to lead to better crops. Crop diversification and the reforestation programs, silviculture programs, we need to continue to invest in that. It has to come from farmers. The question that I raise is, like, when we force farmers to buy bigger and bigger machines that have larger and larger turning radius, how do you actually then begin to set up buffer zones that you can manage smaller fields? Like, that seems to me to be a contradiction in terms. So we have to figure out what kind of environmental and technological innovations we're going to create. But climate change and making sure that we can reduce the amount of agricultural chemicals that are going into our soil and increase the organic matter, We're going to be responsible for a small part of it, but we're going to be recipients of a larger part of it. We need also the mitigation strategies that are going to look us to the future so that we can sustain the initiatives that we're talking about right now at this table.
Thank you. Additional, Peter, yeah?
Yeah, the carbon credit markets that I mentioned in my initial response are fairly new, and they're not terribly well developed or understood currently. But that doesn't mean that we should not, as a province, be at the forefront here. If we feel that this is a good way of both, and by the way, small island states are the leaders around the world when it comes to climate change because we are the most vulnerable. So I think it's up to us, if we want to protect our island, to be the leaders in fields like this. So I think development of carbon markets is critical, and we could be an active partner in that. It's absolutely essential for your income and also for the well-being of our future.
Dennis?
Yeah, I would just say again that this is an area where we should take our leadership from you. I think government can lead from the side on this and be helpful and help with incentives and other resources, but some of the things that farmers are already doing, there's so much science that is in farming here every day. We need to just build upon that, but take our leadership from you, and that's what I think we've demonstrated over 4 years, that you know, we're a good partner to work with. When you have good ideas, we will invest in them and put the resources where they need to be, but it should come from you because you guys do this every day.
John?
Yeah. Just to reiterate the point, put it in another context, that we always have to follow the money on this. When farmers can identify what they can do to reduce their costs and contribute to the environment, we have to look at why that's not already being done. Because I think people that are doing that work every day have already considered this. So why doesn't it happen? If it's a question of the government not putting the right priorities or funding in place, that's fixable.
Thank you. Yeah, our industry will produce about 150,000 tons of reductions before 2040, so we will have an opportunity to be leaders in carbon markets with the right support. Next question is about adaptation. Island farmers have been significantly impacted by climate change in recent years, with Hurricane Dorian in 2019, a severe drought in 2020, and the devastation of Hurricane Fiona this past September. How will your government assist agriculture with adapting to the increasing severity and frequency of climate change events? We'll start with you, Dennis.
Yeah, I think every Prince Edward Islander through Fiona understands the impact of climate change, and I've said it 100 times and I'll say it again, it's just like PEI was picked up and flipped upside down during Fiona, and I think we're dramatically and fundamentally changed as islanders because of it. The first thing you need to do when you have a catastrophe like that is to be there with the resources to get people through, and that's what we've done. We had a $17 million fund that helped fund programs to deal with the impacts of Fiona for our agriculture community. But we also have begun conversations with the Government of Canada to talk about a 15 or 20-year plan for how we adapt Prince Edward Island to the changing climate and to get us ready and to adapt for the new reality. So that would include things like burying power lines, for example, but also how we can work with our farms, with our farming community to make sure that you are ready, using your expertise, using your skills in science and all of the hard work that you put in over time to develop and adapt new policies to help you with that. I think we need to have we need to protect our shorelines, so many things we need to do as a province, and I think we need a long-term plan here with significant funding from the federal government to work to adapt PEI to get ready for what seems to be no longer the exception, but maybe more the rule.
Thank you, Dennis. Sharon?
Thank you. Certainly, we did see the effects of Fiona, and I would echo that too. With watching though how the agricultural community took care of each other, and that was really wonderful to see. Heartbreaking too. So the devastation to crops was evident, and also to livestock and what it did. Extreme weathers here. We know these storms are going to continue to come. We need a plan. We need to accelerate on-farm climate adaptation and mitigation initiatives that leverage federal, provincial funding and increase adoption of proven practices. And so what works? And we have really good examples of that, and they've been mentioned here tonight as well, but we have a long way to go. I've mentioned some of these before, and investing in Alice, helping build berms and terraces, and incentivizing farmers to use reduced tillage equipment, and those kinds of things that we talked about. But most importantly, when these storms hit, it's important that government be there to provide the leadership to help us get through it and move forward. Whether this is financial compensation, support programs, and advocating for federal dollars when needed. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. Joe?
Thanks, Tom. It was, when I go through this list in my mind, so there's Juan and White Juan and Dorian and Fiona, and I can guarantee if I can live another 10 or 15 years, there's going to be a bunch more. These changes are just going to keep coming on because that's the way that the world is going. And if we don't have a plan to compensate farmers for the loss of crops that are going to happen. I mean, last year, looking at the apples on the ground after Fiona was really sad. But when I tried to put myself into the position of somebody that just lost their income for the year, and I have no way to even imagine that because of that loss. So that has to be part of a mitigation strategy. But we also have to look at how can we diminish the negative effects of Category 1 hurricanes. And that has to be, we start by burying power lines, but we need access to power, we need access to water, we need access to decent transportation in the midst of these kinds of disasters. And the people that are going to have the best ideas are the people in rural PEI that have to live with those. Then that has to be part of the broad provincial plan when we start confronting these disasters.
Thank you, Joe. Peter?
So it's clear that the costs of inaction are already overwhelming the costs of action. The longer we wait to become significant contributors to climate action and making sure that our planet is better protected, the better it is for everybody. The cost of inaction to our society generally is phenomenal. And to the agricultural sector, it is also phenomenal and substantial. And every time we have a hurricane, whether it's the crops that are destroyed, whether it is the infrastructure, the barns that are lost, whether it is the young farmers who are no longer willing to come into the industry because they look at that and they think, my goodness, how can I possibly outlay the capital to get into farming, knowing that all of these risks, these new risks, there's always been risks in agriculture, but these new risks, these frightening risks are there. So we need a government that recognizes that and is willing to come forward and support farmers. And one of the things that we need to do is to diversify our crops and make sure that we have a government that is there. We're already seeing this with new potato varieties. We're seeing it with new crops that do not require as much water, that can survive droughts much better. But all of these new innovations involve risk, and you need a government there to shoulder some of the burden of the costs of that risk. And I think if we do all of these things together, government and agriculture in partnership, we can create a sustainable and thriving agricultural sector into the future. But it's not going to be easy.
Thank you. Rebuttals? Dennis?
Yeah, I would just sort of say, building upon that, I have a slightly different approach. I don't think I, as the Premier or as the leader of a party, should tell you what to plant or what to grow. I think you should determine that for yourself based on a variety of different topics. And if government can help along the way, help make that a little bit more profitable, maybe give you some seed money to start, help you with market development along the way, that should be the job of government. I think I can see some of your faces there where many of you are probably getting a little bit offended of four politicians up here telling you what you should grow and how you should grow it and all the things you're doing wrong. I think we should take our leadership from you and be there as a good partner along the way to help when you make those decisions.
Joe?
I haven't been hearing the same thing, Dennis, that we're telling people what to plant. I haven't been hearing that. So, and just to clarify, that's not anybody's intention. But the discussion about what to plant and when to plant. And I think that we have the model of industrial agriculture on the table. As the bigger you get and the more technological you can be, the more profits you're going to make. But there should be a different model. A model for somebody who wants to be a small farmer and also be able to make a decent living. Both of those models can coexist.
Peter, 30 seconds.
Yeah, so I didn't hear that either. I appreciate you saying that, Joe, because what I said, or certainly what I intended to say, was you bring the wisdom, you bring the experience, and the government is there to bring the cash to help you, to allow you to do that. We need a partnership here, and it's not government telling you what to plant. I never said that, I never inferred that. It is government being there as an active partner to make sure that all of the risks, the new risks that farmers are being asked to shoulder, are shared with the public purse. And only then, because you're such an important part of this province, only then we'll be able to move forward together.
Sharon, 30 seconds.
Well, I have to say, the Liberal government can't be the only ones that didn't say we didn't tell you what to plant. We certainly aren't going to tell you what to do either. But here's what we do want to do. We want to make sure we stay ahead of the science so we can start to help with mitigating the severe storms. We want to work with you and take leadership from you and support the industry, because you are the most significant economic driver in this province, and we need your sustained success. So whatever that takes and whatever conversation we need to take, we will be there with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. Our final topic for the evening is sustainable rural communities. The success of our farms are intertwined with the success of our rural communities. Without reliable childcare, healthcare, and housing, neither can thrive. With our provincial population expected to grow, our rural communities will need reliable support to provide the services required to attract and retain people. We have two questions here. We're going to take them separately. The first question is, how will your party alleviate the housing shortage in rural Prince Edward Island? And we'll start with you, Sharon.
Great. This is something I love to talk about. I've been involved with affordable housing and housing initiatives for a long time. You know, what I would start at the outset to say is that part of this that we're seeing is just the lack of planning over the last few years. But we have a provincial-wide problem. One of the things that I want to talk to you about this is really exciting for families is that one of the initiatives we have is a first-time home buyers program, whereby families with an income of less than $95,000 can get an interest-reducing loan. Or interest-reducing subsidy on the first $200,000 of their mortgage for up to $4,000 per year. So what that means is your kids can come home and start looking at getting into the housing market. The other thing is we're going to expand access to low-cost financing that provides $150 million over the next 3 years to not-for-profits, co-ops, developers to build new affordable housing and PEI. But what I do want to do is that we don't always have to think about, you know, high-density housing in Charlottetown. We want to make CDIFs available for rural development as well, so that people in rural areas can invest in community housing. So we have other kinds of initiatives similar to that, so that we can spread the population from tip to tip and not just concentrate on downtown areas. But we want a balanced approach to housing. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. Joe?
Yeah, West Prince has lost over 3,000 people in the last 15 years. The movement away from rural PEI is going to continue unless we are able to transform some of the quality of life for people that want to stay there. And I'll go back to guaranteed basic income. It's not exactly on housing, but if people have decent housing and a decent income, they'll stay there. The part that's missing in our housing strategy is the public sector. So we've subsidized lots of development, and I just give one example. Developers measure affordability at 15% below the market value. Well, I'm going to tell you, if you have to pay $1,500 a month for an apartment and you're working minimum wage, this is not affordable. Affordability should be based only on minimum wage, and the calculation is clear. Minimum wage times 7 hours a day times 22 days a month divided by 4. That's what affordability is. If private developers want subsidies to build homes, then we're asking that's the definition of affordability that they have, and that they would commit 25% of the units that are being built for 25 years. 25 for 25 affordability. But the other part is that we need public investment in public housing. And that has to be much broader than just providing social housing for people that need it, but also ways for younger people to get into houses.
Thank you, Joe. Peter?
So the way to alleviate the housing shortage, assuming that our population is still going to continue to grow, and I think that's a very safe assumption, is we need to build more houses. We know that we need at least 2,000 new units every year just to keep up with the population growth. That's not to get ahead of it, but just to keep up with the population growth. Currently, we have relied entirely on the private sector in order to do that, and we have not been keeping up. So as Joe said, this is a time when the public sector has to step up and take its fair share and build affordable, accessible housing. And that's why in the Green Party platform you will see over the next 5 years almost $500 million of investment in public housing. We've almost had no investment in public housing in Prince Edward Island for a very long time. And until we have public investment, significant public investment, and we rely on the private sector entirely, we're not going to get ahead of this. We would, of course, work in partnership with the private sector, and given interest rates as they are right now, government, I think, has to come forward with some low-interest loans, because the ability for developers to shoulder the burden of the increased cost, the input costs in building new these days is significant. And so I think government can also help the private sector with low interest loans. But the critical thing we have to do, particularly in rural areas, is we need to build more. And that means more public investment in public housing.
Thank you, Peter. Dennis?
Yeah, I think the simple answer is we need more spaces, we need more publicly owned spaces, we need more affordable spaces, we need more private development, we need more. We just need more spaces. But this is an area we have to be careful in. For the first question of the night, we talked about how we can protect farmland. Much of the farmland in rural, or much of the land in rural communities that we will be looking to develop might be farmland. So here's the juxtaposition we find ourselves in, how we do this adequately, how we do it accurately, how we grow our communities, it's all intertwined together. We have committed $150 million in the capital budget last year, the largest ever in the history of our province, which is dedicated to public housing units across Prince Edward Island. We have loaned $50 million in low interest money to private developers. We've committed to doubling that to get more houses going, but we have to make sure we can work with the Construction Industry Association that they can actually build what we are putting forward for them. And I'm proud that our plan has incorporated their input, which I think is important. But we have to, this is why we need our land use planning. This is what we need to determine how we're going to be this. But I grew up my whole life in rural Prince Edward Island. If you want people to live in rural Prince Edward Island, you need to have access to services like schools, hospitals, and other important services to keep people there so they can live, work, and raise a family there. And as long as I'm the Premier of Prince Edward Island, we'll have schools and hospitals in rural Prince Edward Island.
Thank you. Sharon, you like to rebut?
Sure. These are great ideas. It's just too bad they're 4 years too late. One of the things that I would like to, I just wanted to mention is that we talked about two committees. Planning is so important. $500 million is a lot of money. The Liberal plan is based on an economic analysis of some realities of our fiscal situation, and it is a balance between public, private, not-for-profit, and trying to make sure that we have a balance across the rural areas and downtown as well. But one of the other things that we would do is institute a cabinet committee on housing to provide leadership and accountability for housing projects and initiatives, so it's a long-term plan. Thank you.
Joe?
Sorry about that. Yeah, fingers aren't working properly. I've seen farmers who are contracting temporary foreign workers do such a wonderful job on housing their workers, and I've seen other farmers do a miserable job. The ones that are doing a great job, thank you so much. I went into a home up in Western PEI a few years ago. The windows were, this was February, the windows were leaky, the door was cracked open, there's 7 people living in there, and you couldn't find out who owned the house.
Thank you, Joe. Peter?
Thanks, Donnie. So it was interesting that both Dennis and Sharon said how critical land use planning was going to be in doing this right, and yet both of them, as I said, about an hour and a half ago at the beginning of this debate, have had 50 years in order to implement that and have chosen not to for whatever reason. Because not only do we need more units, but we need to build them in the right place, whether that's in an urban setting or the question here was specifically about rural areas. Because without good land use planning, we are not going to be building houses in the right place. And we cannot build them on agricultural land. In my own district in Fairview, we had somebody build a subdivision without any permits whatsoever. It's disgraceful.
Thank you, Peter. Finally, Dennis?
Yeah, well, we're working with municipalities, the PEI Federation of Municipalities, $25 million plan. Essentially, if you have a municipality and you have some land within your community that you need developed, we'll pay for the infrastructure and the cost to develop it. And the other thing I think that every islander should be proud of is that we initiated a Tune Transit, so you can jump on the bus anywhere in Prince Edward Island, get to where you want to go for $2, and that's how you make investments in rural PEI. You make it affordable for them.
Thank you. And our final question of the evening. How will your party ensure the sustainability of healthcare in rural Prince Edward Island? And we'll start with you, Joe.
Well, I'd just like to mention our candidate in District 25, Dr. Herb Dickinson. When a previous government was going to close Western Hospital, and we had an NDP MLA in the legislature, Herb said no. And it looks like he's going to have to it's not about closure, it's about delivering the right services. This is absolutely possible. The doctors, nurses, the nurse practitioners that we need, they're already living here. We've established a system that if you want to do a medical degree, you have to do it in a medical exam, you have to do it in English or French. But if you've been trained in Urdu or Farsi or Spanish, why can't you do an exam in the language that you were trained in? This shouldn't even be a question. And then offering up, I'm working right now with a young woman who is educated in the Caribbean. She has a work permit. She's finished all her studies. She needs a residency, and we won't give her a residency because she doesn't have permanent residence. This crisis that we have is a crisis of our own making. We have the people in our communities that can do the work. We have to give them a license to be able to work. The announcement that I made today is that right off the bat, New Democrats are going to fight for anybody that's trained in the Commonwealth of the United States, in the Commonwealth or in the United States, that we will open up the doors for medical exams, for residencies, for the right criteria so that we can have doctors, nurses, nurse practitioners, and other health professionals working on the ground here in PEI.
Thank you, Joe. Peter?
So no doubt many of you in this room would have watched the debate last night, and it started off with healthcare and was dominated for the first at least third of that debate by questions on healthcare, and quite rightly so, because our system is unraveling before our eyes. We are facing system collapse. The question was specifically about rural services, and that's absolutely critical, and we have to review the incentives that we have in place to make sure that rural services remain in place. An independent report says that anybody in Canada must be able to access primary healthcare services within half an hour of where they live. And we are in danger of losing our ability to follow through on that. There are two things that we need to do. First of all, fundamentally, we have to pay our healthcare workers a wage that is competitive with our neighbouring provinces, and we're not doing that. The Green Party platform increases across the board all frontline healthcare workers, not just some like Dennis King did, but all frontline healthcare workers by 15%. That will bring us at least into the competitive marketplace with our neighbouring province and allow us to keep the experienced healthcare workers that we have. The second thing we have to do is to get the political meddling out of healthcare. We talked earlier tonight, many have said, oh, us politicians shouldn't be telling you farmers what to do. In the same way they shouldn't be telling the healthcare system how it should operate. We need to get political meddling out of healthcare, allow the experts and the professionals in that field to give us the best healthcare system from tip to tip so that all islanders receive the care that we need and deserve.
Thank you, Peter. Dennis?
I'll start off by saying I know a lot of people like to have revisionist history here, and so I'll just clarify that Dr. Herb might have said no, but it was Pat Binns who signed the executive order. So I'll just get that on the board.
Under duress.
Under no duress at all. Proudly, I passed him the pen. What we need to do in healthcare is change a system that was built in the 1950s that doesn't serve us anymore. And part of our process of what we've been working on for 4 years is increasing access to healthcare for you. It used to be that you started your healthcare journey with a doctor. That's not the reality anymore. There aren't enough doctors in the system, and there aren't doctors who want that to be the level of system delivery that we have. So we're working on a collaborative model of care where there will be doctors, where there will be nurse practitioners, and there will be allied health professionals, RNs, and so many others there to provide the service that you need. And we're also doing programs like Pharmacy Plus, where over 24,000 Islanders, or close to 24,000 Islanders, have accessed 32 common ailments at a pharmacy in a community, large and small, urban and rural, that you used to have to go to the ER or a walk-in clinic for. I've said it a million times, so I'll say it 1,000,001. We have great health care when you can get at it. We've made it difficult to get at it. We're improving the access to health care so you can get it as close to home as possible, and that's how you build strong, sustainable communities in rural PEI.
Thank you. Sharon?
Thank you. This very question is the reason why I'm here tonight. I get into this because over the last 4 years I've watched our healthcare system plummet from having pretty good scores on high measures to the absolute worst scores in the country. Just so you know, from what I understand, the recruitment budget was underspent by the King government, and $83,000 was invested in community emergency centers, so we know, and I also, Peter and I have talked about this many times, there's a big difference between meddling and leadership. And leadership is what's needed. They didn't ask the hard questions, which is why we're in this position we're in right now. The reason why I said I would take on the Minister of Education, or the Minister of Health, that's a Freudian slip. The Minister of Health is to provide the leadership that everyone has been asking for. The unions have been asking for it. Derek Key was asking for it. The workers are asking for it, and we're here to give it, and we will invest, and we'll invest heavily, and we made an announcement tonight about a 7-point plan, and we're going to get started right away. They've had 4 years. They've demonstrated, the opposition too, that they haven't been able to make markers, and our Premier said that it's never been in better shape than it's in now. So we need real leadership on this file, and we're prepared to do it.
Rebuttals? Joe, start with you, 30 seconds.
Yeah. We can be measured by our actions, and just the one simple one. The nurses were protesting last night outside the Confederation Center before the debate. We knew we were coming into an election. We had an over an $80 million surplus. The government chose to give money away to individuals instead of addressing a healthcare crisis. That contract should have been settled a long time before. The nurses are right to protest. I wish they were here tonight. This is the kind of stuff that has to get fixed. Workers cannot be forced to work under those conditions without a contract.
Thank you, Joe. Peter, 30 seconds.
I'm going to follow up on what Joe said, and the nurses who were standing outside the Confederation Centre last night indeed have reason to be mad as hell, because they have been without a contract for 2 years. That's the longest that their union has ever been without a contract. In 2019, Dennis King promised in his platform that he would provide timely resolution of all contracts. And that clearly has not happened. And then he called a snap election to put their contract on hold for a further 2 months at least. This is not leadership. This is why we have such a crisis in our healthcare system.
Thank you, Peter. Dennis?
Well, I promise you in 4 years there'll be an election, and it won't be a snap of the finger, it will be democracy. So we should be mindful of that. I would just say we have continued down a path of trying hard to open up access points to health care for you. We have a model that is built from the 50s that doesn't work, it doesn't serve you anymore, and we're not trying to prop it up, we're trying to change it. It's difficult, it's not easy, there's no magic buttons to press, but we've made progress, we'll continue to make progress. I'm proud of the people who provide the service in Prince Edward Island, and I want to make it better for you every day.
Thank you, Dennis. Sharon, 30 seconds.
Sure. I think it's imperative that the leadership is shown in healthcare, and I'll tell you why. We just talked about a lot of strategies here tonight. We talked about labor force management, but here's what I'm hearing right now. We can't grow our businesses on PEI because people won't come to a province where there are 30,000 people without access to primary health care, where they have no access or limited access to chronic disease management. So we need to make sure there is leadership in this file, or it's going to be tough for any of us to find workers to work and help us expand our businesses. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. That brings us to the end of our questions. Thank you all very much. We'll begin with the closing statements. 2 minutes. Peter, we'll start with you.
Thank you so much, Donnie. I've really enjoyed this debate, and again, I want to thank you all for coming out tonight and being here for this, and for everybody who's watching at home. I hope you've enjoyed the discussions here. Islanders have to ask themselves some very big questions in this election. Have things improved in your life over the last 4 years of a Dennis King administration? Has healthcare got better? No, it has not. Has the housing crisis eased? No, it hasn't. Has the cost of living improved under Dennis King? No, it's considerably worse. Has the protection of our beaches and our shorelines and our waterways and our forests and our fields and our farmland, has that improved? Again, a big no. All of these things have got substantially worse in the last 4 years. We need new government here on Prince Edward Island. And the platform that the Green Party is presenting will give you back your healthcare system. We will make a significant dent in the housing crisis. We will finally protect the beaches and the shorelines and the beautiful farmland and forests that are right here on Prince Edward Island. We will bring to you tax relief, and we will give you help with the cost of living. We will finally give Islanders the honest, transparent government that you have craved for so long. So if you want a government and a leadership that you can truly trust for the next 4 years, then vote Green. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Peter. Dennis?
Thank you, Donald, and thank you for you being here tonight, all the organizers of the forum, and my colleagues for being here tonight and for sharing their ideas and views for PEI. Democracy works best when we all sit up here and are free to talk about these ideas. As I said in my opening statement, whether it was on Parliament Hill or in Washington or in farm fields or in boardrooms across PEI and beyond, I've worked hard to walk shoulder to shoulder with you, for all Islanders, fighting with you and fighting for you as we face many challenges together. You don't need to know the list, but you know, this punitive international trade action we've had, 2 hurricanes, a global pandemic, supply chain bottlenecks, rail blockades, cyber attacks, volatile world markets, soaring energy costs, rising inflation, all the things Peter blamed me for. The Leafs didn't win the cup either, so you might as well blame me for that. Through it all, we've stood together. We walked every step together. We did it together. We took the hard times on and we walked it together. I've never been prouder of the last 4 years than when I stood outside Parliament Hill giving away potatoes with so many farmers. It was one of the coldest days ever, but we did it and we made our point and we opened the borders, and we're only halfway done. We got to get our seed potato moving again. I will work with you to get that done, to right that wrong. I have demonstrated over 4 years that I'll walk every step with you, and if you put your faith in me on April 3rd, I promise you I'll walk every step forward with you. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Dennis. Sharon?
Thank you. Peter blames you and I blame Peter, so hey, there's a lot of blame to go around. This has been a great evening. Thank you. I want to thank the Federation of Agriculture once again for hosting this debate. Thanks to all of you here in attendance. This has been a great experience, and I think folks are watching online as well. Discussing the issues of importance to agriculture is certainly vital within an election that has been so tightly focused elsewhere. This industry, you and generations before you, have been the economic engine for this province for so long. You represent the backbone of our rural communities and PEI. You are more than just neighbors. You donate to local hockey teams, volunteer at local churches, and are a voice at many of our community functions. PEI is the prosperous place that it is because of you. The issues we discussed tonight are important. The answers you have heard, you should consider as you go to the voting booth, if you haven't already. Our land, our water, our rural communities, your future are all part of the ballot question on the differences and agreements you heard tonight. I hope you remember. Hold us all accountable to the promises made and the commitments pledged. The Liberals have a balanced approach. We have a solid, responsible plan. Agriculture has leadership, and you need a good partner. And we feel that the Liberal Party has what it takes. I hope that when you step into that voting booth, that you are able to support the Liberal team, and I look forward to supporting you following this election and continue to prosper. Thank you.
Thank you. Joe?
Thanks, Donald. Thank you to my three colleagues up here at the table. This is it's lovely to be here. The questions I think are really important. More important than the questions, though, is how we can all engage in this. And I started tonight by saying that the commitment to transparency. We're not making any more land, so we have to know how we're going to use it. And we need to know how we're going to use it from tip to tip. But we also need to know who's there. Who controls, who owns it, who controls it. Nobody need to fear this. This should be public information. If people are overextended on how much land they have, we should all be looking to that and call people on it. The enforcement of the Lands Protection Act is critical. You have a commitment from a New Democrat government that the Lands Protection Act is an essential piece of legislation to the future health of agriculture across this province. We'll do that. And the creation of a land bank is part of that. What's at risk, though, in this election, in addition to that, is that we've watched, and I can acknowledge the tough times and tough decisions that the government had to make. But I would be a lot happier, Dennis, with all the things that you've done if we weren't living in a health crisis and if we weren't living in a housing crisis. Because these are not unfixable. But they are unfixable if we don't look for new ways to address them. We cannot continue to make decisions the same way and expect different results. That's never going to happen. So we have the people in place to staff up. But you got to get a contract signed with the nurses. That has to happen. And it should have happened last year, not next month. These are just administrative tasks that have to be done. And I'm committed to making sure those happen. Thank you so much.
Keisha, I invite you up to close the evening.
So I'd like to just thank everyone for participating in tonight's debate. It is much appreciated to have you all here tonight. There are no shortage of challenges that we must all work together to meet. I look forward to continuing to work effectively with the provincial government to grow our industry. So please, everyone, don't forget to vote on Monday and get home safe tonight. And I think we should all have a great big round of applause for all our good
Thank you.